The first letter of Peter brings a clear vision of the call and vocation of Christians as living stones that God will build into a spiritual house. The image is of a grand building in which a believer who yields to the grace of God has a place as one of the building blocks, without which the building would not stand. Peter envisions our vocation as part of Christ's own work and place in the world. Christ is the cornerstone of the building, a strong foundation upon which the abundant life of the world is built. Christ is also the keystone that holds the walls and roof in strong protection and without collapsing. In this life and work in the world, we are supported and buttressed by the living Christ. I think of the stones cut from quarries for great cathedrals or temples or mosques. The master builder would see in an indistinguishable mass or block of rock the shape and purpose of a perfect stone for a particular place in the building. We are reminded by the letter, once you were no people, now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, now you have received mercy. Hidden in the dark of the rock, you have been chosen to live as a living stone in the marvelous light. You have been saved from the quarry pit for a holy purpose, to be a living stone in the household of God, a royal priesthood living into the good news of God in the world. This passage of Peter's letter should be an inspiration to leaders of any organization which hopes to make a positive contribution to the life of the world. Leaders concern themselves with building organizations of people who contribute to the common good of humanity through their service or production or influence. This letter of Peter guides leadership to clearly focus on the task at hand, remembering that a great building cannot successfully rise if attention is diverted from the proper care of the architect's vision to meet the mission of the building, or the engineer's careful plans and faithful adjustments to meet the context and conditions of construction, or this important selection, preparation, and placement of the stone. Living stones of human organizations are the attention of leaders. The vision that meets the mission isn't always at the forefront and constantly guides the project. But also think with me of the great scaffolding that is built while the stones are cut from the rock and carried and put into place. That scaffolding, which cares and nurtures and pays attention to those living stones as they assume their place in relationship to all of the other stones to make this great building, relying on the strength of the corner and keystone to fulfill its purpose. The reason that it was saved and included in this great building is always of foremost attention to the leaders. I just completed co-teaching a course called Planning and Planting in the Churches. The students in that class were exceptional. They went out to study churches who were in transitional and transformational places. Others went to new starts. Others to churches with expansion possibilities. Possible satellite campuses were explored. There were churches whose neighborhood base had disappeared and then been torn down. A new gathering of folk who were refugees from bad church experience had gathered together seeking meaning and opened themselves to God for new possibilities. A whole variety of organizations called church. Bar none, the students were clear that good leadership and future hope was most present when the focus remained on the mission and a daily attention to a dynamic vision into which the people gathered could live and grow in spirit and in numbers. Leadership focusing on helping those gathered, opening themselves to be built into spiritual houses of living stones. Of course, there were appropriate organizational matters, launch dates for new ministries, buildings and locations to house those ministries. These were important. But we remember that they're like the scaffolding needed for a temple to rise. But these matters could not take the place of the attention to the living stones and their work of salvation. Or, the students observed, the launch dates, the building plans, numerical goals, these were all empty markers that had no meaning in and of themselves, unless the vision, the mission, and the living stones were at the center of focus in relationship to God. Good leadership in the image of Peter is wise enough to know that it must be like a newborn infant longing for the pure spiritual milk so that it can grow strong in salvation, yearning for the pure mission and purpose that is given by the grace of God. Many leaders I've known in business, service professions, government, and the church across the religious spectrums have convinced me that their effectiveness is rooted in their devotion to a greater vision and purpose for their organization that contributes to the greater good of human society. They seek a vision and grace in their own devotion and listen deeply to that grace and vision as it comes from those with whom they share leadership and commitment. They focus on the living stones in their care and seek to grow into the greater purpose for which their vocation was conceived.